In the heart of ancient Greece, nestled in the rugged landscape of Laconia, a city-state arose unlike any other. This wasn't Athens with its philosophers and playwrights. This was Sparta, a name that even today echoes with whispers of iron discipline, unmatched bravery, and a society forged in the crucible of war. Forget everything you think you know. We're going beyond the myths and the movies to uncover the real story of the Spartans, a people who sacrificed everything for the sake of the state. Our journey begins not on the battlefield, but in the cradle. For a Spartan, life was a test from the very first breath. Newborns were examined by the elders of the city. If a baby was deemed weak or imperfect, it was left on a hillside to die. A harsh reality. But for the Spartans, it was the first step in creating a society of perfect warriors. Survival meant you had earned the right to be a Spartan. If a boy survived this initial trial, his life was set on a singular path. At the tender age of 7, he was taken from his family and entered the Agoge, a brutal state-sponsored training program designed to strip away individuality and forge him into a cog in the Spartan war machine. This was more than just military school. It was an all-encompassing system that would define his entire existence. Life in the Agoge was a relentless cycle of hardship. The boys were kept perpetually hungry to teach them how to forage and, yes, how to steal. If they were caught, the punishment wasn't for stealing, but for being clumsy enough to get caught. They were forced to walk barefoot, wear a single cloak year-round, and sleep on beds made of reeds. They cut themselves. Every lesson, every hardship was designed to build physical toughness, resourcefulness, and an unbreakable tolerance for pain and discomfort. Their education wasn't about art or philosophy. It was about obedience, endurance, and combat. They learned to fight, to wrestle, and to wield the tools of a hoplite warrior, the heavy bronze shield, the long spear, and the short sword. They were taught to speak in short, pithy statements, a style we now call laconic, because on the battlefield, there's no time for long speeches. They were taught to see themselves not as individuals, but as part of a wall of shields and spears where the safety of the man next to you was as important as your own. But what about the women of Sparta? While the men were off training and fighting, Spartan women enjoyed a level of freedom and influence unheard of in the rest of the Greek world. They weren't secluded in their homes like Athenian women. They were educated, they participated in sports, and they were fiercely independent. Their primary role was to be the mothers of warriors. A famous Spartan saying has a mother handing her son his shield, telling him, "Come back with it, or on it. Victory or death." There was no room for cowards. Spartan women could also own and inherit property, which gave them significant economic power. With the men so often away at war, it was the women who managed the estates and ran the households, ensuring the Spartan state continued to function. They were strong, outspoken, and respected. They were the backbone of this unique society, raising the next generation of protectors. At the age of 20, a Spartan man graduated from the Agoge. He was now a full-fledged soldier, but he wasn't yet a full citizen. He had to join a syestia, a common mess hall, where he would eat all his meals with his comrades for the rest of his life. This was another tool to build unbreakable bonds of brotherhood. Only after being accepted into one of these dining clubs and reaching the age of 30 was he granted full citizenship and the right to live at home with his wife and family. The Spartan government was a strange and complex mix of monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy. They had 2 kings, usually from two rival royal families. This dual kingship was a check on power, preventing one man from becoming a tyrant. The real power, however, often lay with the Gerousia, a council of 30 elders over the age of 60, and a group of 5 officials called the ephors, who were elected annually. This system provided stability and ensured that tradition was always upheld. And then there was the foundation upon which this entire society was built. The Helots were conquered people tied to the land. They worked as state-owned serfs. They vastly outnumbered the Spartan citizens and lived in a constant state of subjugation. It was their labor that freed up the Spartan men to dedicate their entire lives to warfare. But this came at a cost. The Spartans lived in perpetual fear of a Helot uprising. To keep them in check, the Spartan secret police, the Cryptia, would terrorize the Helot population, even murdering those who seemed too strong or too defiant. This brutal reality is the dark underbelly of the Spartan legend. Of course, no story of Sparta is complete without the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC here. A small force of Greeks, led by 300 Spartans and their king Leonidas, made a stand against the massive invading Persian army. For 3 days, they held the narrow pass, inflicting devastating casualties on the Persians. They knew it was a suicide mission. They knew they would die. But their goal wasn't just to win a battle. It was to buy time for the rest of Greece to mobilize and to show the world what it meant to be Spartan. Betrayed by a local who showed the Persians a secret path, the Spartans were surrounded. Leonidas dismissed most of the Greek allies, choosing to stay with his 300 Spartans and a few hundred other loyal Greeks. They fought to the last man, their stand becoming an immortal symbol of courage against overwhelming odds. Thermopylae cemented the Spartan reputation throughout the ancient world and for all of history. For a time, Sparta was the dominant power in Greece, especially after defeating its great rival, Athens, in the Peloponnesian War. The Spartan infantry was considered invincible, but the very system that made Sparta so strong also contained the seeds of its downfall. Its rigid, unchanging nature made it unable to adapt. The constant warfare and the brutal culling of its own population meant the number of full Spartan citizens dwindled dangerously. Eventually, other Greek powers like Thebes developed new military tactics that could break the vaunted Spartan. At the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, the Thebans crushed the Spartan army, shattering the myth of their invincibility. From that point on, Sparta's power declined rapidly. The warrior state that had sacrificed everything for military perfection found itself unable to cope with a changing world. So what is the legacy of Sparta? It's a complex and often contradictory one. We admire their bravery, their discipline, and their commitment to a cause greater than themselves. But we are also troubled by their brutality, their rigid social structure, and their oppression of the Helots. Sparta forces us to ask difficult questions about freedom, society, and the price of security. They were not just the heroes of the movie screen. They were a real, complex people who created one of the most unique and formidable societies the world has ever known. Their story is a powerful reminder that history is never simple, and the line between a hero and a tyrant can sometimes be as thin as the edge of a Spartan sword. Thanks for joining us on this journey back to ancient Sparta. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Let us know in the comments what ancient civilization you want to see us cover next. Until then, stay curious.